All right, let's get to our next guest and look for the first moves of the open. We're going to be joined by Diane King Hall, the co-host of Fast Market with me. Diane, we're talking some names that are moving post-earnings. Coca-Cola, we talked about this yesterday on our show. Yes. The bar was really high. It was just kind of mind-boggling how much this staple had gone to all-time highs ahead of earnings, but we're seeing a pullback here today.
Yeah, indeed. And so that probably lines up with some of the data that we saw from Folio. It was actually a mixed quarter for Coca-Cola. They did beat on the bottom line, but top line came in a little lighter than expected. Earnings on an adjusted basis were 58 cents per share. So that was a beat. The street was looking for 56 cents. Revenue came in at $11.8 billion. That was weaker than expected. The street was looking for more than $12 billion. So, and they also issued a modest growth forecast. So that's weighing on shares right now, off a little bit more than 8%, but they were indicated lower than this in the pre-market, so not doing as bad as the indications were in the pre-market. It seems like investors are focusing on the softer revenue and signs that consumer demand may be under a little bit of pressure here. When you look at how organic revenue growth, they're forecasting between 4 to 5%. EPS growth forecast, comparable EPS, they're projecting 7 to 8%. So guidance seen as steady but not aggressive, so that reinforces these concerns about slower consumer demand. There's some trends that analysts have been looking at, budget-conscious shoppers, cutting back on discretionary spending, so that hits Coca-Cola, obviously, especially if there's this trade-down effect. Their total volume for the full year of 2025 was flat, hence how the shares are performing. Demand weakness that we're seeing that mirrors what we saw in the rival Pepsi in terms of some of that weakness. There were some standouts in premium brands, and I think, this lines up with a theme that I know you're going to be talking to Ms. Schneider coming up. And the premium brands, and what's interesting is Smart Water, right? So she talks a lot about the vanity trade. So people are buying Smart Water, they're buying Body Armor, they're buying Fairlife. So they're willing to pay up for the perceived healthier or premium brands. And the water, the sports drink, the coffee, and the tea segment, that actually increased, volume increased there by 3%. North America volume was up just 1%. Latin America volume was a little higher than that, but just by 2%. So does signal some stabilization after some recent softness that we saw in those markets. Europe is being flagged as an area of continued pressure for Coca-Cola. But again, where you're seeing some of the strength, more of the strength is in what's perceived as healthier. In fact, Coke Zero Sugar, you saw volume growth there of 13%, Tom.
Yep, maybe a little bit of selling, maybe some profit taking after that massive rally that we've seen in this name also, but it is off of those pre-market lows at this point. Next one we got up here, Diane, Onsemi. The stock's actually rallied. It's been pretty volatile since releasing those earnings. It seemed like it was a decent report, but maybe a little bit light on guidance here.
Yeah, indeed. And that was one of the things we saw the stock initially get dinged off the back of its results indicated in the pre-market. It was actually indicated under pressure. But right now, as you mentioned, it is higher today. So it's adding to its gains year to date. And so I guess investors are kind of shaking off the worries that they have about this one. They did report a sharp drop in fourth quarter profit in terms of how it did on earnings versus expectations. Adjusted EPS was actually a beat at 64 cents per share. The street was looking for 62 cents. Revenue coming in essentially in line with expectations at $1.53 billion. Now, revenue did fall 11%. There was a bright spot in their smaller intelligent sensing unit. You saw year-over-year growth there, but you see these big declines in power solutions, down 11%. Analog and mixed signal down 9%. Intelligent sensing, although it's down, it was better than it had been previously. So, and better than what the expectations were. So there are the management tone in terms of, their post-earnings call where they said there's increasing signs of stabilization in key end markets. So they tried to, kind of point to where the positive may be. And to some, that essentially suggests maybe the worst in terms of the semiconductor downturn, maybe moderating, and hence maybe why we're seeing a little pickup right now in those shares.
Yeah, and we're also seeing a little bit of a pickup here in our next stock that we're going to talk about, and that's Palantir. I looked at this report out of this Daiwa analyst. Diane, and I'm going, hey, where's this guy been? Even though the stock's pulled back about 30% from those record highs we saw a few months ago, yeah, we got an upgrade here in Palantir.
It's true. And listen, they had strong results. I was talking to Jay Woods earlier about this at Freedom Capital Markets. And, you know, he talked about how investors have reacted despite strong results for Palantir. But Daiwa's upgraded it to a buy from neutral. So they're coming off the sidelines of this. But this is an interesting one in terms of where they see the price target. The price target they have is 180, which does obviously signal upside from here, but it's down from their prior price target. So overall, it does signal that they see some greater confidence in the growth story here for Palantir. But it's interesting to see, you know, kind of that double-handed approach to this, upgrading it to a buy, but trimming their price target here on this one. They highlight the U.S. operations as a primary driver, and then they point out strength in both government and commercial demand. So they think that its analytics platform is just gaining deeper traction, Tom.
Yeah, the battle continues, Diane. Valuations versus that growth rate of 70% last quarter. So, yeah, battleground stock becoming the theme here in Palantir. All right. Thanks to Diane King Hall for joining me. She's the co-host of Fast Market with me.